All right, everybody, that we are back here for another episode. Steve Laffey, SteveLaffey.com, Fixing America, the movie on Amazon. Definitely check it out there. And Primary
Mistake.
Colors,
Mistake.
Primary Mistake. Primary Colors was the movie with about Bill Clinton.
That's right. Prime mistake is doesn't mention him too much.
No, it
Penguin
shouldn't.
books.
But anyways, we had a big decision that came on down the line here today, Steve, with obviously the Trump guilty on 34 counts. What is your take on that? Obviously, you ran against him in 2024. The press was, some of them were good to you, majority were not. But what was your take on the Trump being guilty of 34 counts?
I must tell you, of all the things I've ever tried not to follow, this is one of them. It seems so stupid,
Right.
so out of control. But he's guilty again. So remember, folks, it's hard to get 12 people. I don't care if it's New York City. I don't care if it's deep Chicago. It's hard to get 12 people. I thought there'd be one person saying, "You people are Floyd, we're not doing this." But I really didn't follow the case. But he's been found guilty in a civil court of abusing a lady.
Right.
He's had to pay her money.
Yeah.
He has at least 27 women who've come forward, and we know their names. It's on a Wikipedia page that he's abused them. His first wife said when they were getting divorced that he raped her. Now we have a case where he's found guilty in New York, and I get it. This is like a misdemeanor that's not a misdemeanor, that he's never been found guilty of a crime. He probably won't get a jail sentence. I'm just at a loss to understand how we could get this far with Donald Trump as a candidate against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I'm just at a loss because it doesn't seem
but
like.
Steve, just to interject quickly, wouldn't you think, though, we saw this woman that was before the porn star. She was on Anderson Cooper, and she was kind of totally out of it, saying all kinds of weird things to him. I'm not an Anderson Cooper fan, but it was very strange how she was talking and acted, saying she was going to go shopping with the money. And
listen, I have no idea what happened. All I know is that he was found guilty again. So
right. I'm just saying, for women that really get raped, which happens, obviously, it's not really the person that you would want to, push around and say that, this is and I'm fumbling and stumbling with my English right now, Steve, but you get what I'm saying. It's not somebody that you would want to represent a rape victim, I guess, would be the correct terminology.
My major point is that of course, I've said this before, I've said it on your show, the real case is about the secret documents that he took home.
Right.
You can't do it. That's what they should focus on. I'm not sure this changes anything.
No. It's a porn star. He had sex. There's tons of politicians that do that, or even worse. I mean, come on.
It's not really my level of expertise to even follow it. It's not what I do, right? I do financial stuff. So all I can tell you is what I just read before we came on. We got a national debt. This is the problem, though. The New York Times, the Fox News, the whatever, they're going to focus on this for days. They've been focusing on it all day, every day. And people like me who care about the financial health of America and our children, we're not focused on it. We're just not focused on it. It seems bizarre that there's this many people who want to say this about Trump. Michael Cohen, just to go off to Michael Cohen, we do know one thing about Michael Cohen. He is a complete liar.
Right.
He is the worst lawyer. But Trump's problem, this is the narcissism, okay? Before Michael Cohen was the worst lawyer of all time, remember, he was the best lawyer of all time. This is the Trump narcissism.
The narcissism.
I love Pence. I hate Pence. We could do this with every character he's ever. Nikki Haley's the greatest. She's got the brain of a pea. But this is, so it gets tiring. And what we really need is a heavyweight person who can say, we've got some problems. Here's what we're going to have to do. Listen, this is going to be tough, but to get America back on track, this is what we have to do. None of that is happening in any realm at any TV channel right now in America. It's all Trump. If it's on MSNBC, someone's looking like this at it. Very serious. Like, this is the worst thing. He was guilty of murder, and they found him guilty of murder, and they murdered this person, and just, and because he didn't. On Fox, I'm sure it's like, hey, they got people on who, Jonathan Turley, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Dershowitz is probably saying he got railroaded.
Yeah.
I really don't have time. Does anybody have time for the complete nonsense in America anymore? This is the problem now. How does Trump get caught up with this? He gets caught up with it because he did make hush money payments. He doesn't pay the people that he hires. He does hire substandard people and then tries to get them to do illegal things, more than likely, and then tells them they're the worst people in the world. Remember, one thing about Michael Cohen, I forget the name of the law school he went to. It is the worst law school in America. It is the lowest rated law school, and he was not on law review.
Right.
So he is a terrible lawyer. He did go to prison. I'm not so sure anything he said has any relevance in my courtroom. If I was a judge, I'd be like, really? What are you doing? You got any other evidence? I wouldn't have let Stormy Daniels testify. She had nothing to do with the case.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is bizarre. And again, it gets away from it gets away from even what's happening in New York City. Buildings are going bust. There's crime everywhere. You can't go on the subway. The mayor's dancing in Los Angeles with people instead of back home. The whole thing is a complete crap show in New York City, and I'm never going there again. That's a bigger story than Trump, but we don't hear about it.
And not even just that, they had Robert De Niro down there for the Biden campaign making a speech.
Right, the whole thing's crazy.
Telling people to F off.
Right.
He said, and again, we both don't like Trump, Steve, but you wouldn't go to the Academy Awards and say, F Trump, and then everybody claps. And
no, of course not. The whole country is, I mean, I didn't see this, but did De Niro bring a baseball bat like he was going to whack people in the back of the head, like one of his movies? I mean, who cares, Robert? Stay home. You're an actor. You have so you can memorize lines. You have no background in this stuff. What are you doing? Go make it. He had
two guys behind him, Steve, that were former cops for the Capitol Police on January 6th. And he starts talking about January 6th. That has nothing to do with what's going on in this case. And then one of the Trump supporters said that those guys lied under oath. And De Niro said, what? And all of a sudden, he was just going back and forth with the guy. It's a total sideshow. Yeah, but this is what America loves, Steve. They love the Kardashians. They love reality TV in general. So the Biden campaign brings some actor that's 80 some odd years old down there with two guys from the former Capitol policemen that are standing behind them like they're bouncers.
Right.
I mean, it's a total joke. It's
I guess on the flip side, Doug Burgum shows up. He wants to be the vice president, the governor of North Dakota. He shows up. What is he doing there? I mean, what is he? What is he going to do? Get a horse and be like, Manic in an old TV show or something? I mean, the whole thing is. Anyway, let's not even talk. It's bizarre. It just shows. It wasn't
just Doug Burgum. They had Byron Donalds from Florida, Matt Gaetz from Florida. All these congressmen and women are down there. Marjorie Taylor Greene. She just turned 50, and she just turned 50, and she's taking pictures in a bikini now. I mean, look, she looks great, phenomenal shape. But why are we congressmen and women taking pictures with bathing suits and bikinis and putting them on?
I mean, someone bring back Nixon and Spiro Agnew.
And then AOC's running around saying, girl. Like, what are we?
It wasn't so sad. This is what's going on in America, right? These are the real issues, not Social Security, not the Fed and inflation, not the middle class, not how do we make life better? How do we have a strong national defense? How do we keep the grid from going down? Yeah. This is America.
It's sad, but this is the way America is, and this is the downfall of the society. And we saw what happened in Rome. It was the same sort of issues that led towards the downfall of their society. And the chickens are coming back home to roost in this country from the military-industrial complex with the debt and the deficit, and the list goes on and on. The Green New Deal silliness that they're trying to push.
Right.
It's just a joke. I mean, Steve, we'll move on to the next topic, but just to close with this, I walk around Florida. I walk around Rhode Island. I'm in Rhode Island at the moment now. And I look at these people, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't matter. And half of them look like a bunch of fools.
Yeah.
And you look around and you say, what the hell happened to the country?
Right. And
what happened?
Do you think any of them are walking around saying, wow, what a great country I live in? This is wonderful. No, that's what, when I was a kid, that's what we did. We were like, this is great.
Yeah.
America.
Well, Steve, we go back to 9/11. Again, I was a youngster. I was at CJCR during that time in Garden City. You were still in Rhode Island at this time, getting ready to be mayor of the city of Cranston.
Yeah.
And, and obviously you started in 2003, but, going back to 2001, people, again, whether you agreed with Bush or you didn't, you had an American flag on your car. You put your hand over your heart. Yeah. You were proud to be an American. You were proud to say the national anthem. You were proud to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And we've fallen so far from that time. Yeah. It's really despicable.
I mean, really,
it hasn't been that long, Steve. It's only been 23 years.
It's been 23 years of the internet and bad, people staring at phones as they walk down the street into a fountain, never looking up to say hello. No. Kids not learning, a pandemic that didn't have to happen.
Right.
Money being sent in checks to people that shouldn't have been sent. A corrupt PPP program that many, if not more than several congressmen and senators took part in. Rich businessmen got money, regular folks didn't. And so now people are just sort of out for themselves. And who can really, in a sense, who can really blame them?
Listen, I was talking to a woman in New York City, and they're talking about robbing Kias now. And they have this whole new TikTok phase. And with that, Steve, these kids, this woman is telling me that they're 14, 15 years old. Again, what we were speaking about yesterday off here on the phone. They're in the public school system. They don't go to school. They're robbing these cars. They're robbing people blind. They videotape it, put it on Twitter, put it on Facebook, and they get a kick out of it because they know that they're not going to be around for much long because they're going to either be in jail, they're going to be dead. So they might as well just get a kick out of themselves while they're alive and, on the streets and have a party. And they're crashing the cars. They're stealing the cars and they're crashing them.
Right. And then you have just people, it's just really sad. And we don't have a leader we have leaders. We don't have people that the ABC, NBC, and so forth are willing to put on TV every day to say, this is how we should behave.
Well, Les Munoz from, I believe he was on CBS, used to be the president, came out there when Trump was running in 2016 and said, we might not like Trump, but he's great for business because it's ratings galore. Remember back in 2016, Steve, they were putting every Trump speech on MSNBC, Fox, ABC, CBS, the list goes on and on. Every speech, but they hated him, but he was great for ratings, and he still is. And as you just stated, they're putting him on every station right now. The Trump trial is a total farce. A lot of silliness. It's just him going to get elected now for the second term because they're just publicizing him, giving him free press. He might not be able to go to Colorado, Texas, Florida, Ohio, whatever state it may be, but he's getting free air coverage every day on every major news station, so he doesn't have to go because the true believers are going to go and vote for him because they say it's a farce and it's a joke as far as this trial goes, and they're seeing it on TV every day. And that's all he has to do is just keep getting them to hammer him left and right and drag him into court, make him look like he's innocent and make him look like he's being pushed around by the deep state, as he calls it. And that's it. Yeah. And he's a shoo-in. And Biden is a joke. They can't get anything right. So that's it. That's the game.
Right. That's the game. And the people on MSNBC and left-wing channels still think they can hurt Trump by doing this when obviously that doesn't work. I
kind of feel like they would want Trump to win because it goes back to the money machine, Steve.
Yeah, maybe they do.
Yeah. Even with the Democrats.
All they care about is ratings. No one cares about the news.
Yeah, Steve, the Democrats, I have a feeling that some of them want Trump to win too. Some of the guys in the Senate, the House, because you can just fundraise off Trump every day. Something that he said, it's an easy money grab. And you
Right.
don't have to do anything if you're a Democrat. You just blame everything on Trump, and
Right.
that's it. And you get the gridlock again for another 2 years. You have the midterms, and it stays
Especially
gridlocked.
people, especially Democrats who have very safe seats. They probably love
Right.
having Trump in because they do. They're in very liberal, crazy places like San Francisco, and they do raise money off every word that Trump says. And it seems crazy to me, you know? I just got a fundraising thing from No Labels. Asked me if I wanted to put $1,000 in to help Larry Hogan, who fled No Labels to run as a milquetoast,
Senate
Republican, I
campaign.
guess. And I'm like, I just sent an email back saying something like, no, I don't want to give $1 to someone who's been in politics his whole life. He may have been a half decent governor. I don't know what he really did. I don't really care. But he was with your organization and fled when he had something better for himself, not for you. And yet now you're helping these people, but how does it help your organization? You didn't find a candidate. So this is how they raise money, right? The whole thing is just so broken. And yet the people who really need help, people who are mentally ill, people who are the low middle class, people who both parents are working, who want a decent education for their kids and are really going to to the end of the work. They're putting them in a Catholic school because they got it, whatever they're doing. These are the people who don't have time for this nonsense. They're just struggling. They can't buy a home because they're under 35. They didn't get into one yet, but they were saving. They had 40 grand saved up, but they need 90 and they can't get the more. So these are the people we have to think about, and yet no one's thinking about. There are two
So,
economies. The really rich people are still going to Hermes and Dior, and then everybody else is sucking wind, taking their last trip before the Great Recession, and they lose their job. And people know this. So, and here we are talking about. Here we are talking about. We might as well move to the Kardashians. Oh, I don't know I don't even know their names, but we might as well move to the Kardashians. Maybe more people will watch, right? What's their names? What do they do? They do sex tapes, I think. I don't know, but maybe that's what we should move to. I'm joking. Let's go to something else.
yeah. Well, Steve, are we moving towards like a feudalism system back in the Middle Ages where it's just rich and poor? You know, the
We are.
serf.
I mean, not feudalism, but we have a giant inequality of wealth.
Yeah.
And some of it's driven by the fact that it's stuff I can't understand. I don't understand why people would spend this much money on Taylor Swift when she seems to be a pretty young lady who can sing a couple of songs, but it ain't the Beatles. I mean, it's not even
Right.
Boston. So
Steve, they're
I think
taking courses on Taylor Swift at colleges now. This is a big deal
yes,
now around the
yeah.
country.
And so it seems like it's sometimes it's people's fault. Why would you spend money on that? I don't go to a baseball game unless it's like, I mean, the last major league, and I have some money. So it's not like, I mean, I don't go to a major league baseball game. The last one I went to, the Denver Broncos, was 4 tickets, 4 popcorns, 4 drinks, sodas, and 4 something else for $40. I went to the
Wow,
game.
that's a steal.
That's
Yeah.
pretty good. I don't do unless someone hands me a Red Sox ticket when I'm in Boston, and like, I'm not, you gotta be kidding me. I'm not, it's not that great. But yes, we have a society where the rich take all, they own the assets. And so even when rates rise, it's wealthy people who don't even have to buy stocks, but have lots of cash. I mean, the ultimate example is what's happening with Warren Buffett. I'm not blaming Warren Buffett, but he's got $170 billion of cash. It makes him 5% on cash. Who's doing better, him or someone who has a savings account making nothing with 2 grand in it, who can't make next month's food for their family? That's what's happening. And people who already bought homes, or people who have 3 homes, are doing much better than people who are younger and less wealthy. So the less wealthy people have almost no way to break through.
Yeah.
I mean, some people do. They're unbelievable computer science people, let's say, but our society is becoming more stratified. And this is really bad because this is how societies eventually break up. And what we need are policies to bring back the middle class. And I ran on president saying we need to unify the country over that. Let's have policies to bring back the middle class. Number one was Social Security, where people would retire and be in the middle class, right?
Yeah.
So these things aren't happening. And it's very unfortunate because the more this continues, the less likely it is for the people who are the have-nots to say, yeah, I want to be in the military. Yeah, I want to help the country in a crisis. Yes, I want to volunteer at the local whatever. They're just like, screw it. And who can really blame them? The other real problem, of course, that goes along with this, that we're into the second generation of lousy schools. And that means 35-year-old people don't know how to teach their kids because they went to lousy public schools. And the kids are learning less, as you mentioned at the beginning, or not even going. And then you have states that don't have any competition. Now, here in Colorado, there's lots of competition, so it's not quite the problem. There's far less kids in public school as a percentage than, say, in maybe one of the worst places like Rhode Island. You know, small state with no charter schools, several Catholic schools thriving, but for the most part, their kids in Providence don't get a chance. Here in Denver, people don't get a chance. In Memphis, kids don't get a chance. So that's not the focus of the New York Times any longer. The only focus they have is to, like, and in local communities, it's sort of like, how do we move these people into rich neighborhoods so they can have more busing? That's what they think, rather than how do we get really good schools? How do we use the internet to lower property taxes? How do we use the internet so kids learn more? No one really thinks this through at public schools because there would be less teachers, right? So same thing at higher education. Biden's, you know, the ultimate example of, like, how do I get some votes? I guess I'll try to keep forgiving loans, even though the Supreme Court said it was illegal. And truly taking off more than half the country because they didn't go to college, right? Or people who paid off their loans like me, and I had very small amount of loans because I went to very rich schools and I was very needy. So I was very blessed to be able to do this. But they're not really, he's not helping things. He's not helping things by lowering the cost of education. And there are many ways to do it. I've discussed it nationwide. And these things are simply not being discussed or happening. So we're stuck.
Well, that's the thing, Steve. Even with the Biden student loan issue, it's only $10,000. If you have a $200,000, $500,000 loan, I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. That's not even counting the interest. We're talking about interest. Some people have that's way more than $10,000 just in the interest.
Right.
I mean, so this is a joke. I mean, this is a trick. But again, and I hate to say this to people that are listening, but what's true is true. The American people, and Trump had this right when he ran, he said the American people are stupid. There's a lot of stupid people in this country. And they fall for silly, idiotic maneuvers like this student debt thing. Because it's a joke.
Yeah.
They're not going to help you.
Total sideshow. It's not happening. It gets overturned by the courts and he just keeps doing it. So Joe Biden, disrespect for the law is wide. He knows it's all illegal. He just still does it. So we live in a country where the leader of the country does things that he knows to be illegal. And then you wonder why people are breaking into, you know, malls. It's like, I mean, from the top, we don't have Eisenhower. We have Joe Biden, whose son's going to probably be convicted of gun charges and go to jail. So, and he's a president who can't remember when his other son died. So we know this to be true. It's not like we're making it up. It's just extraordinarily sad. But yet the people who can make a difference, the Marjorie Greens, the other people, all they're doing is shilling to raise money. And they do it because now it works. In other words, Marjorie Greene will probably run for governor of Mississippi or U.S. Senate Mississippi. She may very well win. She realizes the Trump model just works. She lies. She makes things up. She literally boos the president when he's speaking, which no matter what you think about Joe Biden, nobody should be booing in Congress at the State of the Union address. I realize it's boring. You just sit there, put up with it, but you don't boo. But people booing are raising money. She puts out mailers saying, I booed the president, send me money. And people,
well, that started with Joe Wilson when he booed Obama on the healthcare issue with Obamacare.
Yeah, and Joe Wilson should have been sanctioned because there has to be some way we operate, right? Unless you want to just be like what you see in South Korea where people jump over and grab each other. You know, we used to, I mean, there have been people in the Congress who were caned by other people. There's been a couple of duels. But generally speaking, this stuff shouldn't be happening because it takes you away from what the serious issues are. And the serious issues are so serious. And it goes
I don't think that's too far away from happening, these fights. I think we're getting very close to that in this country. I think there's going to be some people doing some fist punching pretty soon, and it's very close. I want to talk about the credit card crisis. It's a huge crisis, not talked about enough. I remember when I was back in college, they would give you a free T-shirt, a free towel to sign up for a credit card. Everybody was getting credit cards, whether you used them or not. That was on you. Is that where this credit card issue started? And now obviously it's gotten out of control with the spending because people just, as you stated a couple minutes ago, just really don't care anymore because they're so deep in the doo-doo, whatever. It is what it is.
And when they got too deep in the doo-doo in 2021, the government sent them money. So they're sort of thinking, someone's going to send me some money if it goes too far. But take it back a step. You're exactly right. It used to be a rite of passion. You're in college. It still is for many people. How do you stop building credit? You get a Discover card. You get parents say, but go buy something. You have no money. Here's $50. You build your credit for a year. Then you get a real card. Not Discover's not a real card, but you get a credit card. And so that way you move yourself into buying something of some value, maybe a car, and then a home because you build a credit rating. Today, it's much more like I can't pay this credit card. I'll give that credit card. And so what's happened is as people have run out of money starting about January 1st, in a sense, from the money that was sent, they've started using their credit cards in sort of record amounts in the growth of credit cards. And the delinquency of credit cards are starting to rise. And so where this is going to end, who knows? But there's another problem that things that didn't exist years ago. I do something on the credit card, let's say, and my statement, whatever. And then one of my credit cards will send me, I bought something for $90, let's say. It's like you can make 10 payments of $99. I'm like, 10 payments of $90? What are you out of your effing mind? Excuse, what are you out of your mind? Right. But that's like these companies that do that, and they're not part of the credit system. So there's billions and trillions of dollars building up with these people, right? Right. And they're going to blow up. They're just totally going to blow up. But we don't even know who they are. So it's sort of like it's not as major as what happened in 2008, where we really didn't know where the leverage was. I mean, we kind of did, but when people were getting liars loans and everything, you had to know that once things went down a little bit, people were broke, right? Because when you put nothing down on a home for 400 grand and you make up the fact that you make 200, but you make 50 grand a year and you can't pay the mortgage after the first month, and you didn't put 20% down, all it has to do is go down a little, you walk away and the whole thing is broke because the house is only worth 250. This is a different situation, but it's the same principle. And what's happening along the way? We're now saying, the federal government's trying to say that, hey, on second mortgages, which mostly second mortgages are ones where you use to, like, I shouldn't say second mortgages, you take out cash from your home, a cash out. Say you bought a home for 400, now it's worth 900. Or say you bought it for 200, it's worth 500 today because prices are going up. You then go say, well, I want to buy a boat for 100 grand. You borrow off your home. Okay, it's worth 500. Now you have a $300,000 mortgage, a second mortgage, or whatever you want to call it. These things are actually very risky in a sense because you keep building it up. But at least we know where it is. It's on the home. What this trying to do is say these loans, which usually, if the mortgage today is 7%, these loans are about 10 because they're riskier, right? They come after the first mortgage. Now, what's happening? Federal government's trying to say that they should be the same rate or even lower. More people will do it. More people will take on debt. What will happen? Prices of homes will come down one day. People won't have any equity. They'll hand in the keys. The banks will go broke. It's the same cycle. It happens.
Yeah, but the problem with that is we're going to see BlackRock buy up all these houses then, correct?
Well, I think they've already done that and they're kind of stuck with them. In fact, they're kind of stuck with people wanting to get out of those deals and they won't let them out. So they may have bought too many.
Yeah, but isn't that turning into the country into a renting society?
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that doesn't unwind itself in a very bad way for BlackRock. But along the way, you're right. We should have thought this through. No, I mean, I'm a very conservative guy, but no one should have bought up 134,000 homes in one fund, right? Yeah. I mean, it makes no sense. So if Congress wanted to focus on anything, it would be certain things like for example, the CHIP Act, where we just gave money to Intel. How's their stock done? Not so well. How's their cost overruns? They're really big. When you give people money, it's not going to work out. We should have done something different, like required chips to be made in America by 2028 or something, and just make them do it. They would do it. We're a very rich country. Same thing here. Why doesn't Congress get together and say, listen, we can't have, this is too far out of bounds of two standard deviations of American life, where the homes are all being bought, not all, but too many on the margin are being bought by one really gigantic firm of really rich people. And we can't have these things be, go back to It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Well, it's a monopoly.
Right. So they're going to have to be forced to sell them. That's all.
Right.
I mean, what's so hard about that? You got 5 years. This doesn't work for America. We need you to have only 12 homes. And
but it goes back to lobbying, Steve, that BlackRock has so much lobbying as far as in Congress, you can't break that.
Right. Same thing with the pharmaceuticals. I mean,
right.
How long have we been saying? I mean, how long can we, if I say this, I might punch somebody if someone walked by me. I'm so angry to say this. So we have a country where you find a drug, you develop the drug, you get X years, let's say 10 years on average, for your patent. You charge sort of whatever you want,
right?
And then it goes generic. Along the way, because of the massive power of Pfizer, the best example that people understand what that would be like Viagra. It took 25 or 30 years for it to go off patent because the company that invented Viagra said, oh, we have a new use for it. It's used for blood pressure. I'm making this up. And so they extended the patent forever when they were charging X per dose. Now, they were charging, it takes 2 cents to make the stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they were charging $1,000 for 30 pills or whatever. And insurance companies were actually sucking it up and doing it. It finally went generic. I have no idea what it goes for, but it probably goes for $1 a pill, not $500 a pill, whatever.
Well, it's all kickbacks now.
Yes, but the extension of patents is wrong. We can just say it. The second thing would be like, all right, so why again is that same pill, cancer pill? It's $30,000 a year to make up a number here in America. In Germany, it's $2,000. Why is America, health insurance companies, you the public, funding the $28,000 difference? Why can't we get that drug in Germany and send it by mail to our home? Why can't we instruct every health insurance company in America, every pharmaceutical company? America pays whatever the least you sell it at around the world. You sell it in Zimbabwe for $100. We in America pay $100. We don't pay 10,000. This is why wouldn't that just be a simple law? And so here's what would happen. It wouldn't be that the price in America would go down to $100. All the other prices would come up to $5,000. We would go down to $5,000. It'd be $5,000.
Yeah.
And we would save trillions of dollars. Very simple concept. But that's not what we do. We, the American public, through you paying the premium of $3,000 a month instead of paying $1,000 a month for your health insurance if you pay for it yourself, or the employer paying it and you making less money, we fund the world's health costs. We actually do. And yet, the only place you're going to hear this happening is right here in this show. It's actually true. And yet we allow it to happen. Why? The massive power of lobbying. The biggest lobbyists are pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies. They pay off people and they hire congressmen and they hire the congressmen's staffers when they leave office. They get $500,000 a year jobs. They go on boards of these companies. And that's why we don't do it. This is the great corruption that isn't talked about. It's not the Marjorie Green crap. It's this. Because to give you a number, we spend 18% of our gross domestic product on healthcare, and most industrial countries are at the most 12. That 6% in America is well over $1 trillion a year of savings that should be in your pocket. And it isn't.
It's not even just that. The country is way sicker than any other country.
Yes, if we add in the obesity and the fact that people don't take care of themselves versus other countries like Switzerland, as I say many times, and Denmark and so forth. And so we need a whole program for that. But again, I have a whole program for this. It's been talked about. People agree with it. It's just not going to happen.
Well,
One,
we went through this about the physical fitness test that used
yes,
to do in
exactly.
grammar school or in the high
Yeah,
school. They don't do any of that anymore. You don't
right.
even have to participate in gym. When I was teaching at the schools in Florida, I subbed for gym one time. All these kids were sitting out. I said, "What's the story here? Why are you people sitting out?" They said, "Oh, we got a note." Note for what? To
A
sit
note for
out?
one.
Sit out.
Yeah.
All
You know
that's
what we
all
would do
these
with
kids.
those kids? Do you know what happened at Cranston East High School? We had played Killer Ball, and there were a couple of kids who decided they wanted to do that. Kind of chubby, fat kids. I surely shouldn't say this publicly. I remember, and I shouldn't say the name, a guy named Steve, a big athlete, and I looked at each other. We said to everybody, you know what? Let's play Killer Ball against the wall with these kids. And we just slammed the balls at them, and their heads kind of bounced off the back of concrete, and they ran. And then we grabbed balls and chased them, and they finally got some exercise. The gym teachers were totally funny, didn't do anything about it. We chased them into the gym, into the lunchroom. But that's what we did with kids who didn't want to do gym, got some notes. We just smashed red balls against their head. It's not a nice thing. It was over 40 years ago, so I can actually say there's no statute of limitations, I think, to come find me.
But it is sad. The country is in bad shape
Bad
health
shape.
wise, and it's getting worse. It's not
Much worse.
getting any better. And it goes to what's in the food, the pesticides being sprayed on the food,
Yeah.
the pesticides being sprayed in general around people's homes. I mean, it's all the kitchen sink.
Yeah, and think about what people do. Like, it's all the Al Gore. It's all about the global warming, which really isn't happening. And how do I really know? The seas aren't really rising. How do I know? Go to Miami, lie down on the ground, the most expensive property that went for $68 million, and ask yourself, did the guy who paid $68 million to be waterfront 1 foot above the water, or bought an island off Bermuda that just sold? Is he stupid? Does he think it's going to be 10 feet underwater in like 6 days? No. What's
Well, not
really
even that. Their home insurance is extremely high, especially
right.
in Florida. There's a big problem with the house insurance as far as pricing. So if that
There
guy
is.
is buying that right
Well,
off
he's
the
got so
water,
much money he doesn't care, but he knows it's not going to be underwater. But the
right.
big problem is really plastics. I
Yeah,
mean, plastics in the ocean coming out of Japan, what we throw in is now ending up in our bodies. It gets
right.
so,
The microplastics,
to
right.
me, that seems to be a crisis worth doing something about. And
Yeah.
yet
No one
we
does
don't.
anything.
We don't. We don't have anything to do about it. We don't. There was one company I know that's recycling plastic. If that could be a giant company, I think it will be. But I think we got to do something about plastic. But that's like so far down on the environmental scale because the electric car thing. So,
Yeah.
and then think about it, the electric car thing. Who really won? The guy at Toyota who said, "You people are screwballs. I'm just doing the hybrid thing first."
Yeah. Well, what about Hertz? I mean, what happened at Hertz? I mean, that's one story.
At
You
least
know,
he got fired. As we said, at least he got fired.
yeah.
You can't fire Al Gore. You can't fire some of these people in the US Senate who make these giant mistakes,
Well,
right?
they say do as I say, but not as I
Right,
do.
right.
And they'll go on their private jets, own their huge houses that are worth $20 million, but you can't do that. You can't even use a gas lawnmower. You can't even use a leaf blower with gas. You have to use the electric one that lasts about 5-10 minutes, and you got to charge it. We used to have a guy that lived next door to me down in Florida, and he had one of those I'm not gas, excuse me, the electric lawnmowers. It took him 2 days to mow his lawn because he would mow it for 30 minutes, then he had to stop and charge it, then he had to mow it again. And by the time he was finished with this whole lawn, it was starting to grow back. He had to repeat the cycle, Steve.
There have been major, no, it's funny because if you think of a good use, there have been major improvements in electric, zero turn mowers. They're more expensive, but there've been major improvements because that actually makes some sense. That the new ones last a couple of hours, and you
Well,
can't just charge them in the garage, and you don't need it for a week. The electric car that goes 247 miles when you only can have one car, or maybe, and then every time they test them, they go 170, not 240, they go to 170. They lie about how many miles you can go. But for the family, now for the rich family, they don't care. They have 3 cars. They take their Tesla, that's a status symbol or whatever. And then if they have to go somewhere else, they drive another car. I have heard of people who are so dumb, and one guy who came up to my house to fix his glass, he was so aghast that his son had bought a Tesla but lived in northern Montana and was driving to Colorado, and the stops were so long, it took him 2 extra days to get to Colorado. And his father was so aghast that his son had actually done this, bought a car and tried to drive it. And I said, I don't know your son, but yeah, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because he only had 1 car. He wasn't a rich guy. He just wanted 1 car. But I think he would just rent a car. But the Hertz story will go down in infamy as one of the all-time disasters, right? Stock goes from 20 to 4 over it. Goes down. The guy gets fined over it. And he's on TV saying this is the greatest thing ever, and Jim Cramer thinks it's the greatest thing ever. And then they have to sell all the cars. Yeah. They bust. They run out. Nobody wants to rent an electric car. I mean, maybe if you just rented to go to a wedding in Boston and you rented in Boston, you just, one day, okay, give me the electric car.
There's also a problem with the weather sometimes with the batteries.
How about up in Chicago? This is what, by the way, this was really in Chicago over the winter, the first real winter where there was some substantial amount of Teslas. It got to be like 20 below. The charging stations froze. They didn't work at all. No matter whether you showed up or not, you could be in line. Nobody could drive these things. People were urged not to drive them. If you got 270 on a charge, you were down to 80. You couldn't go anywhere. People left them on sides of roads. On the flip side, in Phoenix, Tesla had to put out a statement when it got above 110 that you should only charge your Tesla to 70%. Do you remember this one? Yeah. And people are like, I charge it to 70%. I only can go 140. What the hell's going on? Like, this becomes like the old Nissan Leaf that they tried to sell. I don't know if you remember the Nissan Leaf. That one, they tried about 4 years ago. They were giving away Nissan Leafs for like 12 grand at the dealership or the Nissan dealership because they only had got 70 miles. So the whole thing is bizarre that anybody would want to be the primary first mover to get one of these things. But Toyota had the whole deal. And Toyota now is doing what? They're announcing that they're even moving into other stuff slowly, rather than full electric cars. They're going to do biodiesel. They're going to do other things. Toyota really has their act together. I mean, give you an example. You go see the new Toyota Sienna. The old one got 19 miles to the hour. This is the minivan, passenger van. The new one, you don't do anything different. You go 540 miles. It gets 39 miles to the gallon, just doing hybrid. Well, that's a huge difference for some family of 5, as far as what gas is going to be and so forth. So Toyota figured it out. If the rest of the world had just said, you know what, let's make the transition slower. Yeah. Let's not go from here to there with electric cars that totally stink.
Yeah. But were they talking about this climate control when you were growing up? Because I only remember this, and again, I was very young at the time, but maybe this starting out in like 2000, where I started to hear.
Yeah, well, when I was a little kid, remember, settled science in 1970 was that everything to do with oil was from dinosaurs. All oil came from dinosaurs. Now, the first clowns who came along were the Club of Rome people over at MIT. If you look up Club of Rome, so I don't know why they called it that, 1970s, you will find the whole thing about 1, the earth was going to get cooler. 2, by 1990, there would be no oil in the world. They thought, given settled science in 1974, no oil. Now, obviously that was incredibly wrong. The question is, did any of them get fired? Are they still on TV? Yes. The answer is none of them got fired. Lester Thoreau, one of the people, I think he's still alive, still writes books as if he's a serious person. So when you write something that wrong, remember, and there's no penalty for it. Well, what are the people who think the world's getting warmer and there won't be any world left in 10 years? The temperature's going to go up 40 degrees. Like, what do they care? What do they care?
Listen, I used to believe in all that stuff. I was in the liberal hysteria. We went through this many times.
Yes.
And it's being pushed in the colleges extremely hard.
None of it's true.
When you keep getting these facts regurgitated at you, you start to just believe these things.
Right.
And I mean, that's just,
The
common
average person,
psychology.
if you went down the street and asked, there's certain questions everybody should be asked who listen to the news. What percentage of the world's atmosphere is CO2? I bet you the average person says it's 40%. I think it's like 0.4%. It's like a very small amount.
Again, we need this for the trees, I
The
mean,
whole
this
thing is preposterous. It's bizarre. I never, I was at Glacier Park and looking at this beautiful lake in the national park. If you ever get a chance to go to Montana, it's one of the nicest, most beautiful places you can go. And they're pointing out that, of course, that they're saying things like, the Earth, by the way, is about 8,000 years old, just so everybody knows. But they're saying things like, 30 billion years ago, and they even know that like 8,000 or 5,000 years ago, the world really warmed up, and that's why these trees look like this. And I'm like, how did it warm? What do you mean? How did it warm up? Because now we have global warming due to only, no one was producing this much CO2. How did it happen? And there's like this giant jaw-dropping thing among a 30-year-old lady who no one will ask the question. She doesn't have an answer for you. She just stutters and then just keeps going on with what she wants to say.
Yeah. Well,
there's no facts necessary in America.
Well, Steve, the issue is that even if we want to put the global warming perspective into play here and say it's hypothetically true, this country by itself is only 350, well, 330, I should say, million people. Okay. You have China, they're not going to stop polluting.
No.
India's not.
No.
Pakistan's not. And Russia's not. I mean, I just named off 4 other countries that are not going to stop just if you stop. Right. And those countries have altogether, that's what, about 2.5 billion people?
At least.
I mean, China's already won. I know their population is declining.
They're down to 1.3 billion because they had no kids.
Yeah, they declined.
1.4 billion. That's 3 billion. Russia, of course, doesn't have many people because they're all dead and they just don't have any kids either. They're not going to be around in a couple of years.
So we're close to 4.
But we were talking like 4 billion people. So who won't participate at all, who go to meetings and say, yes, we'll do this, and then build a coal plant, in China every week, right? But it gets even worse than that. Forget about the national park. Talk about cities like I live in Fort Collins. They want to be zero emission, blah, 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 for 110,000 people. Woo! The whole thing is like, you have no impact at all. What are you taught? You have zero impact. The biggest impact, America's CO2 emissions are going down. Why? Natural gas. Natural gas is much less pollution than oil or coal. And it's cheaper, and we have it everywhere. Unlike the Club of Rome, it's like everywhere you drill a hole, there seems to be natural gas. So, and it's cheap. I mean, we're 1/10 the cost of natural gas of what goes on in Europe today, even though we send them through LNG, a lot of it. So even if the price of natural gas doubled, which it may very well double over the summer here, these things are very volatile, it's still really cheap. So why wouldn't we just be making a transition with natural gas? Oh no, we can't do that in New England. They don't want the pipe coming through. Can't send it from Pennsylvania to Vermont. Can't get it. These people are whacked.
Yeah.
They're out of control. So just give you an example. Here's the other example. You buy an electric car, you live in Maine, Rhode Island. It's really cold. You won't get the same gas mileage, and you're filling up at 21 cents to 31 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're only getting 60 some odd miles to the gallon equivalent. Only. Still better than my F-250 pickup truck. What works is where you live at 5,000 feet, there's lots of sun, and the cost to meet it, if I filled up at night, is 7 cents a kilowatt an hour. So I'm getting 200 miles a gallon equivalent if I had an electric car. Okay. So why wouldn't we do it more there? Oh no, they got to have them in Maine. You got to have them in Maine, back wheel drive. Whatever. The whole thing is so crazy. It's not even that much of an improvement because the cost of electricity. Will they build, they have Maine Yankee. Well, they have 2 more sites for Maine Yankee. In New Hampshire, they got another site. Are they going to put new nuclear power plants there? They've been fighting about not doing that since I was in college in 1980. They've been protests since. So they didn't do it. They could bring down the cost of electric power. They won't do it. What's really the benefit of an electric car if you're filling up at 31 cents a kilowatt hour or 21 cents a kilowatt? There's not much benefit.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm all for the whole mixture of everything. My
Yeah.
problem is when I'm up here in Rhode Island, they have these wind turbines, which are a joke. They talk about environmentalism.
Right.
They're killing birds left and right because they're
Right.
flying into the turbines. Now there's, I don't know if you've heard this one,
Yes.
but there's whales now being beached in because that turbine in the middle of the ocean is messing up with the signals.
Making
And
them
there's been about 5 or 6 beached whales in the past 2 years. And they talk again about environmentalism, but they're killing birds and now whales. What's it going to be next? Dolphins? I
right.
mean, I know there's no dolphins here, but I'm just saying.
And they won't build any more because the guys in Europe are like, you people are crazy. We
Yeah.
can't build them at that cost. And now that the cost for wind power in Rhode Island is too high. So certainly wind power of all the sources, so people know, is the worst. It can't be turned when you want to have electric power all day long, you can't depend on the wind. You really can't depend on the sun. But the wind is worse because when these things start turning, when you have to go and get wind power, the strain on the grid and the time it takes and the energy it takes to shut down the natural gas thing to use the wind is stupid. What
Yeah.
really works, of course, number one is nuclear, right? You set it up,
Right.
it runs for 40 years. It's 4 cents a kilowatt hour, if indeed you
But
don't
there's
have.
a lot of regulation, Steve.
Right, if
And
indeed you
that's the
don't have
problem.
30 years of protest and cost overruns and lawyers, right? I mean, but just if people would accept the fact that safe nuclear, small nuclear would be 4 cents a kilowatt hour, easy, right? And so we should move our grid to 70% nuclear. Then you have natural gas. Natural gas is easy, it's plentiful, it's in all over New York and Pennsylvania. It can be sent on pipes through pressure. It gets places, it's cheap, and the thing is, in order to have a capitalist society that really runs, we can't be Venezuela. The power has to go on all the time.
Yeah.
When you go to work, you need power. If we live, and eventually California and other places are going to live like this, it looks like. They're going to live in places where it's like, we have a power outage. Well, how do you run AI plants? How do you do Bitcoin, if you like Bitcoin? How do you do energy when you don't have a steady stream of energy that you can count down 24/7, 365 days a year? These are the things, property rights, cheap energy, these are the things that make an economy hum. Sure, you'll have recessions. When you start taking away these things, you have a Venezuela situation. I mean, the tragedy of Venezuela, of course, is that they have the most oil in the world. It's hard to get out of the ground some ways. They have lost a third of their people. Many of their middle-class people and women, I hate to say it this way, they had to go to other countries, sell their hair and do prostitution because of what happened in their country. Their grid goes up and down half the time. These are things that can happen in America if we just decide to keep going on the route we're going on. If we vote in people who just shill around for votes instead of concentrating on the really serious problems that we have in our country. And we don't have a leader in the news today who wants to focus on any of these problems. I'd be okay if it wasn't even my problem. Someone said, listen, here's how the grid is not going to get impacted by a blast from China above the skies. Here's how we're going to have a grid that's independent. Here's how you're going to be off the grid and want, communities off the grid so we're not connected, and how we're going to have power 24/7, and it's going to be more expensive at the beginning, but that's what we're going to have for the next 40 years in America. I'm all in.
Yeah.
Because I know what that means for a country. What does cheap energy mean for a country? If you think about where jobs come from and how the energy usage is going to happen, the country with the best grid and the cheapest energy will attract companies from around the world, like America has. But if we don't have that anymore, we won't attract it. It's that important if you want a real job. These are like the critical things that aren't discussed.
Well, just to be fair with everybody listening still, we do live in a fascist country, just to say that. This is not a capitalist country anymore. This
No.
is a fascist country.
And
So,
people should be reminded what that means. It means that
yeah,
the guy, I've said this before, the guy who
right.
runs like Cleveland Cliffs is like, I know the president through US Steel. I just talked to the president. He's with me. I'm going to make a campaign. People say this stuff, but yes, fascism is that we let capitalism run, but the head dudes like Mussolini, which where it came from, say, no, 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 we need you to produce nails. Go ahead, keep the money. It's not Marxism. We don't kill you. We just say, build this, we need this. Or we don't like the way you're doing that, change that. Or hire my 12 wives and they need to work at your firm. Whatever it is, that's fascism. It's a system unlike socialism where capitalism runs, but it runs at the behest of the powers that be, not the invisible hand of Adam Smith, where everybody's making decisions and the best ones win.
So let's end on this.
Yeah.
I want to end on, I think it's going to be it's going to be kind of a somber note, I think. But when we talk about what's going to go on in the next 24 months, you came on a couple weeks back and spoke about it's not going to be good. Can you kind of describe a little bit more in depth with the audience about what you believe is going to happen in the next 24 months?
Yes, I mean, there are different, we could do scenario analysis, and I'm well vetted to do that, but let's just take some scenarios, all of them bad. There's no good one.
Right.
One scenario, no matter who wins, at some point, like it's happening today, people don't really want to buy these bonds. So you'll see the 2-year, the 10-year, as we keep issuing even more bonds. People saying, well, I require a higher interest rate because I don't think the US government has too much debt. This is especially when we have a recession, and we will have a recession. We don't go that long without recessions, folks. They can do whatever they want. Recessions happen. They could be normal inventory recessions, or they could be ones like 2008 or what happened in 2020, 2021. So when they happen, think about it. Right now, at full employment, remember, full employment is under 5%. I don't care what you read in the paper.
Right.
5% of the people, when you call them on the phone, have just quit their job and they're looking for another one. They don't really care. They got some money. That's still full employment. Right now, we're under 4. It won't stay there. But when that changes, the tax receipts to the federal government go down. So if we're running a deficit of 6% of gross domestic product, right, on our budget deficit, which is huge, to quote Trump, it could be 10. But when it's 10, that's historically way too high. So then you have a real problem with issuing debt. So rates will be higher. Even if inflation's lower, we could have what we call real rates be real high. What happens when inflation is 0? Let's say inflation's 0 in a recession. Everything starts to go down, platinum, this and that, rents and so forth. Or they stay the same and then we don't have inflation. What if the 10-year bond still yields 5? What company can really operate with real profits, borrowing at 5% real rates when they used to borrow normally at 2%, 3% inflation, 2%, 10-year bond yields 5? You could see a real rate of 7% in our country, which means almost nobody can borrow and make a lot of money. So you'll see lots of bankruptcies. There's no way really around this because the debt is too big. It can't be paid back. Everybody seemingly knows this, but does nothing about it because at some point we cross the chasm where everybody wakes up and says, I don't want these bonds. Now, that gets to another point. And the last point I'll make is that there's no way around. At some point, everybody listening, whether you're rich or poor, you really won't want to own US dollars because the dollar will get really weak. There'll be countries that don't have these problems. Switzerland's debt to capita is not 100% like ours, debt to GDP, national debt. It's like 30%. People will flood into the Swiss franc. People will buy more gold. There might be certain land in Canada, let's say. So there's lots of things people will flee to. But when you start having a systemic weak dollar, you get no investment. You get nobody wanting to invest in America because the dollar that they invest in is worth 90 cents 4 years from now, even if they make a 20% profit. They have to get it out in less.
Isn't it true that the Chinese are going away from the bonds and they're more investing in,
yes.
They're more investing in companies like Smithfield because it's pork and the Americans make all this pork, and the Chinese like pork, so they're gonna invest in
True.
that. And
Two
that's what's
two things
going on
with it.
now.
Yes,
But
the Chinese would rather go away, but China is never going to be the world's reserve currency. Let's not worry about that. You need
no,
a massive liquid environment. No foreigners can buy Chinese bonds, so that's out. Doesn't mean, by the way, that China doesn't try to take advantage of this, trade everything
right.
they can in renminbis with the people in Brazil. That's a different story than just holy hell breaks loose in America financially because we let it out. We knew this was happening and we let it go past the point where we could turn back. Too many cracks in the dam, and you get a flood like the 1970s.
But will we see the BRICS take over then with those
No, the
countries?
BRICS will never take over.
No.
They're just crappy countries themselves. Brazil's a crappy country. I mean, no one's going to want to hold Brazil reals. I mean, not really. People want something else, and this is the
But you
real.
do have China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of money involved in this.
Yes, but they're still puny compared to America. They don't have rules of law. Nobody wants to operate out of Saudi Arabia and deal with a sultan. So
Okay.
the answer to that is sort of no. But this doesn't mean it's so if the answers in our country are along the lines of what happened in the 1970s, like, okay, if you have an odd number license plate, the last digit, go to get gas on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, there's long lines. This is the kind of stuff that you could see happen again. This is the
Really?
kind of stuff that destroyed America in the 70s and pulled us apart until Reagan came along, until Paul Volcker came along, until people came to their senses and said, it was Jimmy Carter, to his credit, who got Paul Volcker, 6'7" guy, came in and said, he's basically Steve Laffey, who's 6'7". I would do the same thing. Come in and say, I really don't give a hoot what you think. Here's what we're doing. We're cramming down the money supply. We're raising real interest rates. They're going to have to do something about this budget deficit. It took 7 years and 2 recessions.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing would happen in America again today. It would take 7 years or 5 years and 2 really. It's so much worse today,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it would take so much more pain. I think we will come through it, but the pain is about to happen. The banks are too levered up in commercial loans and other loans that can't be paid back. So they got to be bailed out again. So all these things, Rob, are about to happen. There's no way around it because the debt is too big.
So you said you're not seeing bank runs at all.
No, I don't think that's going to be the answer, but banks will not lend as much and there'll be a recession because of it.
Well, we're going to see a lot of these little commercial banks fail, right?
Yes, you'll see regional banks who
Right.
can't paper it over anymore. People like JP Morgan, they're not the next problem, I don't think. The guy who runs JP Morgan got ready for this stuff. He's ready for private loans. Is anybody really levered? Because he's still levered up a lot too. No, but I don't see that being the problem. The problem is really what happens to real rates, the US dollar, when people say, I've got this much US dollars and this many bonds, I can take no more. Most economists, who are total clowns, think there's an insatiable demand for US dollars. So far, they're kind of right. But you can see what's happening on the edges when they're issuing bonds now. They have to keep issuing short. They can't issue that many long bonds. Now, here's the last statistic. $17 trillion has to roll over and be refinanced from almost 0% to an average of 4.5% today over the next 3 years. Half of our debt. In any normal run country, if I had been running the country back in this, it would be like 3 trillion would be refinanced in 3 years. It's 17 trillion. We don't have very many 30-year bonds. The rollover risk is so large. Think about it. It happens to companies. It's not that they have too much debt. They have too much debt due tomorrow and they can't roll it because nobody wants it. That's America today. That's the real problem. That's what people have to focus on. And it's really too late to even focus on it because it's actually happening. So Janet Yellen got everybody to go crazy positive back in October, November, where she announced instead of this many 20-year bills, 20-year treasury notes that she was going to issue, bonds, she was going to issue much less and she was going to issue some in 3 years. That made the supply of 20 years and 10 years be less. So the yield went down because it was going to be less. That's a one pony trick. She can't keep doing that because at some point, what do you issue everything for one day? I mean, the hyperbole, it can't happen. And so the next time she does it, you may see rates go really high. And that means mortgages will be 10%. And eventually that means housing prices come down. The whole thing works in reverse really badly. And it's happening now.
You know, I want to end with this. Well, two things. And I know we're kind of trending longer than we should, but let's end with this. I've talked to a lot of realtors in the past year, and I think they're full of you know what, because they keep telling me that happy days are going to last forever and the market's not going to go down. And we've been talking about this, you and I and many other people that are involved in economics, saying, when is this housing market going to really take a dive? And go ahead.
It will take some time because people don't have to sell because they have lots of equity.
Is this mostly because of the older people that don't want to get out of their houses because they have that 3% mortgage and they're not going to go into a new house that's 7%?
Right. But in the end, supply comes to meet demand. There'll be lots of houses being built. People will convert apartments into condos, et cetera, et cetera. It will happen if rates continue to go higher and real rates go higher. There's no way around a major recession. It just, you could talk to anybody. Most people who have real estate, who own real estate, not homes, they're 30 years. Everybody else who owns multifamily office buildings, they are 7-year refinanced on a 20-year amortization, meaning they don't even pay down much of the debt. And they're like now and next year starting to refinance from 7 years ago. Not at 4, at 7. If you pulled out a balance sheet and see how that affects their business, it destroys their business. So you'll see massive bankruptcies going on there. It just has to happen if rates stay high or go higher. And because there's not a single person, not Trump, not Biden, not Marjorie Greene, who says, not even any more Rand Paul, he's given up. He said someone attacked him in his backyard. God bless the guy's alive. He's given up. He doesn't say anything about this anymore. He just does his job. He has no balanced budget. He's not standing on the steps of the Capitol. Nobody is, because nobody's listening. The only person who was saying it in the campaign was me. I got very little traction. On ABC, I got some on Newsmax and so forth. At least there's a track record of saying it, but people won't say it. They won't say it because there's no money in it.
Yeah. You know, there was only one person in the U.S. House that voted against the CARES Act, and that's Thomas Massey out of Kentucky. I have a lot of respect for him.
He votes against everything. God bless him. Ken Buck mostly does too. He does.
Right.
God bless him.
Yeah.
He can live on his little solar panel thing in Kentucky. No one knows who he is.
Well, you know, he's trying at least.
No,
So
he's trying. I love him. Great.
Let's end with this, Steve. The best thing, obviously, is for somebody not to be in debt in general. What else should people my age, or for that any age for that matter, make sure that they are in to make sure they can kind of get past this? Because you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is going to happen, and then it's going to take quite a while to resurrect.
Yeah. Listen, save your money. When things look expensive, they are. At some point, everything will be cheap. All I can tell you, there are cycles, for example, in real estate. In 2009 and 10 was the best time to buy real estate, and nobody would. I bought the biggest most expensive piece of property in Fort Collins when I moved here. And that's what I did. And so I sold part of it when things got expensive. But it's part of it I just live on. So, but when there's almost nothing that's cheap, bide your time. Don't be panicking. Don't be forced into buying things that are expensive, whatever they are. Things will get cheap. And I can tell you story to story from buying a tractor to when I sold the tractor. I may have not, I bought a tractor, guy went bankrupt for 22 grand. I used it for 13, I used it for 13 years. And then a year and a half ago, when everything was expensive, I sold it for 33 grand.
When you say cheap, are we going to be looking at back in 07, 08 when houses were
Yeah,
selling
someday you will.
before that at like 300 some odd $1,000 and they'd go
Yes,
down to 200 or 180?
yeah, things will
That-
change. Something will be cheap.
Wow,
Something will be cheap
that's quite a
because
drop.
supply comes to meet demand. But just because they're not cheap now, you have people like saying, I'm just going to buy that home. I don't care, whatever. Now, I'll give you one other situation. The cheapest time ever to buy a home was 1979. I wasn't old enough.
Yeah.
Why? When interest rates are really high, it'll eventually force down housing prices. Everybody was like, don't buy US bonds at yielding 18%. Now, if you bought a 30-year bond in 1979, yielding 18% for 30 years, you made 18% and paid no state and local taxes. It was a
Wow.
great buy, but everybody said don't buy it, right?
Yeah.
That's when everybody said buy gold at 800. It went to 270 over 20 years to 2000. Then people said don't buy it, and it went to 2300. So there are cycles to these things. And right now, until things get crushed again, there aren't many things that are cheap. I'm mostly in cash, looking for the next deal. I'll find it. You'll find it. We just got to wait for it.
But
That's
should you keep a lot of your money outside the bank?
no, I mean, yes. I mean, if you can get 5% at Fidelity, you should. You shouldn't be in a
Yeah.
bank that pays you no interest.
But well, if you're talking about CDs, you shouldn't do it for more than a year, right?
No, you shouldn't. No, no. I would say even on US Treasuries, I wouldn't go up past 2 years.
Yeah,
They
because you
yield
got to
like
be careful.
4.93 today, 2 years. Now, one of the things, I'm not trying to give advice, but if they get really panicked and they start lowering rates quickly, the 2-year yield, at least initially, will go from 4.93 to 3 over like a 3-month period. When that 3-month period, I don't know. People will make a lot of money owning treasuries rather than just a CD that paid you back a certain amount in 1 year. But I wouldn't go out past 2 years in a US
Yeah.
Treasury. That's just me.
Because a lot of these local regional banks, whichever you want to call it, are invested in a lot of this commercial real estate.
Yeah.
And if it
But that's not
pops, then
your
you
worry. As long as you have less than $250,000 in a bank, that's not your worry. They'll pay you. But
okay.
banks don't pay, regional banks pay almost nothing on interest. Go to
Right.
Fidelity,
Yeah, it's
go to
0.5.
Vanguard. There are people that pay you money. Most regional banks are like, they're living in like la la land as far as survival. Like, who really needs a branch?
Yeah, it
They
is
don't really
bad.
need the branch. Ally Bank doesn't have any branches. They pay you 5% on cash.
Right. Well, it's the same thing. I was in Discover a while ago. This was back in 2019, but they were given like 3 or 4 at that time. Now, and then obviously went up to over 5. And now it seems like it's coming back down again.
Well, if someone's not paying you 5% on cash, you shouldn't be in that bank. You can go right to Fidelity today and get 5% on cash.
Right. Right. I'm just saying now it's starting to kind of correct and go back down from
Yeah, a little
5.
bit, but you still get 5% at places, and you should, and then don't buy CDs, buy something 2 years less in duration,
Yeah. No, of course.
Anyway, that's too much in the weeds for people, but yes, don't go out too long and be ready for when things are cheap. There'll be things that'll be cheap. I don't know what they're gonna be. They could be
Right.
red rubies. I'll buy some red rubies. Gotta wait for something to be cheap. There's almost nothing that's cheap.
Right.
And
Anyways,
cheap in commodities means trading at half its cost of getting it out of the ground, like silver was when I was screaming about it. It was $7 an ounce. Today it's 30. No one wanted to buy. They were panicked. That's a commodity. Stocks are cheap when they're good growth companies, and if you can buy the world's best brand, I don't care what it is, McDonald's, Starbucks at less than 10 times earnings, buy it.
yeah. But there is a science to picking the correct stock.
Yes, and that's what I perfected. That's what I do. but
Right.
that's just like, I taught it at the University of Rhode Island. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I should write a book about it probably, but that's what I've done. That's why I don't work. But and I've been blessed to be disciplined enough to not follow the leader. Because in stocks, by the way, you only really care when you buy things cheap. When will institutional buyers come in? They're the people who take it to the moon. What will
Anyway.
they buy next? When Jim Cramer said oil was uninvestable on TV, I bought BP at $17. It's 35 today.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So
All
wait
those-
till they say you can't do it. Real estate's a bad investment, blah, 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 2010. I bought the biggest piece of property you could buy. That's my property. It's surrounded by homes. It's 240 homes one day. People thought I was nuts. I'm like, Fort Collins is gonna grow. Cranston, Rhode Island's not.
Right. Well, nothing's
Anyway,
growing in Rhode Island.
It's hard. Anyway, love you, buddy. That's great. Let's do it again.
Yeah. All right, Steve Laffey, SteveLaffey.com. Fixing America, Primary Mistake is the book. Definitely check it out. Steve, always a pleasure.
Yep. Thank you.